back to the Abide Project. My name's Pastor Lloyd Hemstreet.
And I'm Pastor Cam.
We are coming to you. They've broken for dinner on Tuesday, Synod, and it's been a very eventful 24 hours. There's been a lot of good work that Synod has accomplished in the last day.
A lot of joyful moments today, especially, and some really, emotionally difficult conversations that I think left people a lot more unified than you would have expected, perhaps, coming into a synod where people are here to deliberate and to disagree sometimes.
Yeah.
There's very little unanimity, I guess.
Yeah, there's some rubber stamping that everybody votes yes on, but on a major issue. And so what we saw last night was the discussion. We have had a task force that Synod 2023 put forward and to talk about and discuss this issue of medical assistance in dying. Yeah. And that's an issue that has been going around making waves for a little while now. I can remember as a kid growing up in the 90s in Michigan, we heard about a Dr. Jack Kevorkian. And so those were some of the first conversations of doctor-assisted suicide, as it was referred to at that time. However, in Canada, things have progressed a lot further than that.
Yeah, it really has accelerated in Canada. I don't have the exact timeline in front of me, and it's certainly not off the top of my head. My hair is not even on the top of my head anymore. But we have really taken leaps and bounds. People would say forward, I would say backward.
Yeah.
In the approval of medical assistance in dying. I think that is the official term that we have for it here. Right. To the point where it was approved in Canadian Parliament that there could be medical assistance in dying for people who are suffering from mental health issues, that it could be extended to minors. There was enough pressure on the previous government that they wound up pushing it off. It was supposed to come into effect this year, this March, I believe,
already
in fact.
This year.
And it was pushed off then. It was pushed down the road to 2027.
Okay.
And so this is where it was really cool to have, as part of our ecumenical delegates, the president of the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada, Dr. David Goretzky, because they have been doing very good work on this for a number of years now. And even as I'm thinking about this too, right, I might even have messed up the timelines as we're talking here.
Yeah.
But they've been on this pretty well from the beginning.
Okay.
So he got to speak to it a little bit.
Right.
We also heard from Brian Dykema. Brian was on the task force. He is an elder at First Hamilton Christian Reformed Church. He's also the head of Cardis, which is kind of a Christian think tank that promotes good public policy that is in line with Christian belief.
Right.
Brian does good work. Brian was recently recognized as a distingugood alumnus here at Redeemer.
Okay. Redeemer connection there too.
Yeah,
right?
We have a lot of Redeemer connections
there
in the CRC in Canada.
Very good.
It's not just me.
Yeah.
But again, and this was not one I could be present for. I had things I had to do at home, but I was following along on the live stream. And my goodness, Lloyd, the incredible amount of unity around this issue, even as people were coming up to speak. Right. And there was a part of me, I felt a little bad that this part of me was there, honestly. But there was a part of me that was going, okay, you've all spoken for 15 minutes. There's no disagreement here. This is bad, and we should be against this.
Yes.
People just had all different
spoiler alert, that is where Synod ended up.
Yeah,
that is where they ended up.
Yeah.
But they didn't want to just jump into that. I really appreciated part of what the committee put forward with their report, which Synod recommended to the churches, said this is valuable for our congregations and our members to be reading and understanding. One of the things that they talked about and the report really focused on was the pastoral issues surrounding this and the need for our Christian witness to be displayed, coming alongside of those that are hurting and suffering. This is a broken and sinful world, and people go through terrible things, but we as the people of God have the opportunity to reach out to them, to come alongside of them, to hold up our brothers and sisters and display our love for them in the midst of that. One of the things they talked about was pushing back on this increasing post-Christian culture of death that is pushing in this way. And so they spoke to the need to, the early Christians, what were they known for? Well, one of the things that they were known for was they went and picked up these infants that were abandoned in early Roman culture and said, no, we're going to care for them. We'll adopt them into our families. And so there's an opportunity for the church to stand out once again in this sort of pastoral way of valuing life.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, there was also a note on the floor, and maybe Lloyd, I'll let you speak to this on your side of the border. But in Canada, we've recently had an election. Some of you may have the same MP you had before. Others of you are going to have a different member of parliament. Call that person, put some pressure on them to do what they can to change it.
At least start walking it back, or not go forward with the 2027 plan as a basic starting point.
As a basic starting point. But then even just an encouragement as well, like Lloyd was saying, and like Synod said as well, as Christians, how can we step into the gap?
Right.
How can we provide these care, this even just this ministry of presence that people so desperately need in these situations, somebody to be with them in their suffering, to remind them that life is still good, that life is still a gift from God, and that is something worth celebrating.
Absolutely. And so that is kind of the Canadian side. The U.S. side, we would think, well, Michigan dealt with this in the 90s and hasn't really moved forward. However, several Western states do have medical assistance in dying. And just, I believe it was last week in the state of New York, we have several Christian Reformed churches in New York. Their Senate passed a bill that kind of mirrors, from what I understand, where Canada is at presently. And so this is a growing problem, and Synod wanted to address it. And so not only did we address it pastorally through the report, but Synod said, you know what, we also want to make a prophetic statement in regards to this as well. And so I'm just going to read what the Synod adopted. The Synod said that Synod deplore the legalization and practice of medical assisted suicide, as well as the efforts to expand it to include minors and those suffering solely from psychological disabilities. And so that was the statement that was put forward to say, hey, we want to have a prophetic voice. And as Cam already alluded to, it was a unanimous prophetic voice. A little different context in various states in the U.S. as well as Canada, but all of the delegates came together and said, this is what it means to be a Christian. This is Christian witness in the face of this very, very present issue that is expanding at a horrifying rate in our countries. So that was the big discussion, I would say, on Monday night. The other work that they got done was they went ahead and covered some of the candidacy committee reports. They approved officially the candidates, which we welcomed this morning.
Yes.
So that was a joyous time. There were 19 candidates for ministry that were approved by Synod 2025. Numbers a little lower than what we would hope for, a little lower than the past few years. And so that speaks to the need that there is for more to enter into ministry. And so we would encourage, hey, who do you know that you are seeing the gifts for ministry in? Who could you encourage to speak up? Now, our candidacy director, Susan Leclerc, she spoke to the fact that as of now, it is looking promising that next year's class will be larger, but there's as our Lord said, the fields are ready for a harvest, but the workers are few. And so we need to continue to pray that the Lord would send more workers into the fields.
And part of that too, right, is the work that is going to be done now to put people, to encourage people into ministry. I have one young man in my church who's just getting ready to finish up his undergraduate, actually here at Redeemer. I have another young man in my church who is at Westminster in Pennsylvania. We're still not going to see them up on that stage for 2 to maybe 4 years, perhaps.
Something like that.
This is work. You are planting these seeds now, praying that they are going to bear fruit in 5 to 6 years. And we're kind of seeing, I guess, and you mentioned this before we went on recording here, COVID really did put a wrench in a lot of this, right?
Yeah,
because a lot of those seeds that would have started, 5 years ago. Today it's 2025. 5 years ago was 2020.
Right. So we wondered about that, but either way, we're continuing to pray that the Lord would send more workers, and we're very thankful for those that He sent and that Synod was able to approve. The other 2 items this morning that Synod had the opportunity to do was interview a pair of professors for Calvin Theological Seminary.
Yes.
So, yeah, the first professor was Jared Mickelson. And so he came and gave a great, it was a great interview with him. He answered the questions very well. One pastor said, boy, I think about going back to seminary just to learn from him, one of the guys I was staying with. So, very encouraging, very well-spoken and deep thinker, but very confident in God's word. And that was just displayed in his approach to lift up theology. He is taking a systematic theology position at the seminary, but he talked about how he's training to and wants to live as a pastor theologian, and that those two need to go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't really have anything more to add to that.
Right. The second interview that we had was with Dr. Jessica Joustra, and so she gave a great interview as well. A little different story with her, as she is a lifelong CRC member that has been very active and serving at Redeemer University, as well as connected to the CRC, a member of a local CRC church, and in other ways. And so one of the things I appreciated about Jessica, when they asked, did you see yourself always going in this way? And she's like, well, in many ways, no, but there was in 9th grade when I wrote a 5-page paper, she said, on the canons of Dort. And so that's not something that every 9th grader does by any means. As a host of the Three Forms podcast, where we're currently working through the Belgic and next going to be taking up the canons of Dort, they got a thumbs up for me. I'm not a voting delegate, but I was very impressed and encouraged to hear about that.
I don't know if I knew what the canons were in the 9th grade. So, and I grew up in the CRC.
There you go. So obviously very gifted and talented individual, and so we look forward to how the Lord's going to use her talents to bless those future ministry leaders that are coming through Calvin.
Redeemer has definitely been blessed by Dr. Joustra. I can say that for sure. And I'm very glad that Calvin is bringing her on. She's going to be an asset. Yep,
she will certainly be. Other than that, the main thing the rest of this afternoon was dealing with a bunch of the work of Committee 3. And so there were a number of different reports that Committee 3 has. I don't know, I think it's up to letter H or something like that, F. I get them confused how many each of them have. But so the first thing that they dealt with was, one of the first items was dealing with 3C, which talked about the COD exceptions and their policy, and Synod 2024 said to bring things in line. The committee said that they have, and Synod agreed with that. Yep. The second item was 3B, and that was a bigger discussion because we had a majority and minority report over it. It was this topic of Synod 2024 had instructed that all classes once a year are to go ahead and sign the covenant for office bearers, that there would be a covenant for office bearers signing by all of the delegates at one of the classes meetings. Mm-hmm. And there had been some overtures, and there had been some challenges implementing that, questions around it. How do we have to do this? What is the practices? And so Committee 3 really laid out in a unified manner, really, between the majority and minority report. They were on the same page on a whole bunch of things. They talked about, for the majority report that was adopted, what they said was, we want this at every classes meeting. Just as every synod goes ahead and stands to show their agreement, they want every classes meeting to start with this acknowledgement. And they said it can be done in multiple different ways. You can sign it, you can raise your hands, everyone can speak up to give their agreement or stand. There's lots of freedom and room for the classes, how they're going to implement it. But they said, we just want this practice of unity in all of our classes and all the classes meetings. Even the minority report.
The minority report read very, very, very similarly to the majority report. There were just a few small changes. I think the wording was the biggest change that they were trying to emphasize. Ultimately, Synod went with the majority report, which, again, it's not, I did not feel that there was a significant difference between the two, other than a little bit of the wording and then the frequency of affirming the covenant for office bearers.
It was, how I would describe it is it boiled down to a wisdom issue. The majority report said the best way for us to practice this is going to be to go ahead and say this is going to be the practice for all the CRC, that we're just going to instruct all the classes, this is what you do. The minority report said we're okay with what Synod 24 said, that you'd have to sign it once a year. We're going to keep that. But the minority report said, and we have the goal that everyone would sign or stand or do something, but leave it up to the individual classes how they implement it. And so it was just in my mind, it was a wisdom issue. They both wanted the same goal. The question is it better to just encourage people and hope they get there, or is it better just to say, hey, this is the expectation and let's all come on board and do it? So that is what was decided on that. The last large item was discussion of gravamina, further clarifying on some of that. There's been the language since the 1970s it was brought up.
76?
76, that there were at least 2 forms of gravamina is what they put in when they did that in 76. And it hadn't been touched again until, as far as I know, until Synod 2024, that it was actually more stipulation on what the 2 forms of gravamina are. But we haven't had any other forms of gravamina recognized in our church order before now.
In 2024, it was really part of what they really did was flesh out what is a gravamina.
Yeah.
How do we look at gravamina? And they came up with these 2 distinct categories of confessional difficulty and confessional revision.
Right. And fleshed them out further.
And fleshed them out further, exactly, right? And so when 76 came up, I think the idea was, of course, we want to be wise. We don't want to be shutting the door on things that other synods may have decided that we've just overlooked.
Right.
So then they put in that language of at least 2. Committee 3, in this case, decided to say, well, we've been through this now. We have settled...
Longer than either of our lifetimes since it's been done, and we haven't found any other forms of gravamina. Yeah. And so it was
because of the work of...
Let's clean up that language.
The work of 24 as well, just of Synod 2024 as well, just to clarify what all that meant there. Yeah. We do recognize 2 forms of gravamina, and I think that just makes things a little bit neater.
I think the preamble, or the opening several paragraphs of the gravamina 3E report, they tried to help with a lot of the misunderstandings that have been surrounding this. That when we're saying that we agree with the confessions, that doesn't mean that we're proclaiming we understand everything completely. No. That's never what we've been saying, but rather that everything that we understand about them, we understand it to fully agree with God's word.
I would absolutely recommend go ahead and read that. Once you're done watching this, of course, go ahead and read that preamble. It was very pastoral. It was very well written and very well done.
And I pray that it calms a lot of those that have been really struggling with this, that maybe it answered a lot of their questions and gave them a little more clarity as to this is what we're doing, this is what we're saying, this is what we're not saying, and this is how we're covenanting to live together.
Yep.
All right, well, that is a very packed 24 hours of work. Synod still has more things on the to-do list, and so there's going to be more that they are accomplishing in the next 24 hours. But we give thanks for all the hard work they've put in. And with that, we'll sign off and look forward to updating you again tomorrow, Lord willing.
Blessings. We'll see you then.